am 49 years old. I originally started playing football in high school. So I had 4 years at Sarah High School down in San Mateo, California. School's known for Tom Brady. That was his home school as well. So he came in a couple years after me, but it's still fun to say. While I was at Sarah, I played inside linebacker and started for 4 years. While I was there, I had 3 pretty serious concussions, as well as a pretty serious neck stinger, which they were able to correct the neck stinger with a cowboy collar, which is a special device that kind of holds your head in limited range of motion. However, that may have also affected future concussions as well, because I did have that limited range. But so I had the 3 concussions there. One was pretty serious, where they had the medical staff kept my helmet because I was trying to put myself back in the game. But played and had a good time and did well, and got picked up by Oregon State. And I played there from 1990 to 1995. I also ended up starting all 4 years at inside linebacker for Oregon State. I ended up, by my senior year, was the 2nd leading tackler in the conference. And I was one of the top defensive players as well, which means I had a lot of action. I figure my time at Oregon State, I had 3 more medical grade concussions that were hospitalized. And then I had probably 25 plus other concussions while I was there. I also ended up having a seizure during fall camp, which I ended up keeping secret from the coaches. I had my roommate, and I told him, don't say anything, because I didn't think it was really any big deal. It was a one-time thing. And, I didn't know how that would affect my playing time. I started having symptoms.
Can I ask you one thing? I mean, we don't typically hear about someone saying I had a concussion and hospitalized. You were hospitalized for a concussion?
It was medical grade. When I say hospitalized, I was treated we have a team doctor, and he's an outside doctor from the hospital. So he met with me and had me have observations. So I had overnight observation for that. So I didn't stay in the hospital. My dad brought me back, and I would end up staying with my dad present overnight to watch me. And that was kind of the protocol then. That was as far as you went. My dad watched me overnight, make sure that I, didn't stop breathing in my sleep, so to speak. And by the next morning, I was up watching film at 10 a.m. So a little different world. The concussions were, you got your bell rung. That's kind of as far as it was treated. I didn't ever miss any practices for concussion. In fact, you look at the media guide, they say, a durable player, he's never missed a practice since he's been here. And that was kind of a badge of honor. So you just worked your way through it. I had splitting headaches every day. I was vomiting on the field from, the nausea I was feeling and the dizziness. And I was, popping 1,600 milligrams of Advil a day and burned a hole in my stomach. But, to me as a 17-year-old, I didn't know any better, and nobody pulled me aside and told me any better, so it was just what you did to play. And I loved the game, so that's what you do. Fast forward, I really have been pretty bomb-proof. I've never really been in the hospital, never had any issues. My life has been pretty consistent up until January of this last year. I started having, some memory issues and was having trouble multitasking. Started having, some emotional type issues where, depression started setting in. Unfortunately, at this time, my wife also ended up in the hospital for 17 days with an illness, and she was in the ICU. So what I've later learned from Larry Carr was that an incident like that can actually trigger CTE in you because of the stress, hitting you all at once. And so for me, that seemed to be the incident that kind of put me to the next level. Yeah, and so from there, I ended up really spiraling downward, got to a real dark place. I had pretty much every day driving to work, I was crying and had really dark thoughts. Could envision myself running off the road and just kind of finishing it. I had really short fuse, lot of anxiety. I had lost all short-term memory and had serious brain fog where I, couldn't focus on anything I was doing. I was starting to struggle at work. People were starting to notice the change in me. My mom said, my eyes went dark, where it literally, even the color of my eyes changed in her mind. I kind of pulled back from people, pulled back even from my kids, kind of put myself in my bedroom at night on kind of a self-imposed lockdown. Meanwhile, my body was doing all kinds of crazy things. Hormonally, everything just shut completely down. My heart started racing. I got tinnitus, splitting headaches, you name it. Racing heartbeat, the memory issues, as I said, and I was really in a bad place. And so I found online a group that was founded by who's now my friend, Chris Boyce, the CTE global support group on Facebook. And I went in the first day and kind of shared my story and, said, I'm just looking to see if, anybody else has these things happening and what I can do. And one of the guys in the group messaged me and told me about a study for football players that was going on with photobiomodulation. And I was really intrigued by that. And I said, I got to do something. I can't live like this. I can't make it another day. I mean, I'm getting to minute by minute at this point, with how much life I can cope. And they put me in touch with Larry Carr. And the next day, it was a godsend. The next day, I was speaking with Larry, and he had gotten me into his study, which is an open study with the University of Utah for photobiomodulation.
Wow. It sounds
Good
like
story.
a really, yeah, it's an incredible story. And it seems like, it was kind of one of those classic hallmark things where you do have, kind of a long stretch between the majority of your injuries, and then the onset of these more typically like neurodegenerative profile symptoms. And so were you still like having regular headaches or feeling off and stuff like that, having kind of persistent symptoms in that in between period, or was it mostly like pretty fine?
You know what? Your brain is an incredible, piece of work. I mean, and it manages to account for these things and for, these deficiencies and make kind of adjust your life that you don't realize these things are happening. So, I think some of these things were surfacing earlier, but I had learned to accommodate them. So, I became an OCD person and was very type A with everything has its place. I realize now it's because if it wasn't in its place, my memory wasn't functioning well enough that I'd be able to ever find it again. So, that type of stuff was happening. With sleep, I just knew if I slept in a certain way that the symptoms wouldn't happen. But if I laid flat on my back or turned a certain way, that would cause the vertigo and cause the spinning and some of the other responses that I was having, with the neural stuff. So, yeah, some of these things I think were always there or may have, they just weren't as prominent as this period in January and March. And, when I was going, and they kind of crescendoed in July of this year, where literally as I was going into the study for University of Utah, I was flying out to Utah and I barely made it. I mean, I just was just completely mentally, physically, emotionally just tapped out, exhausted, and that first day we did some baseline testing so they could kind of see where we were at. And, I don't have all the results in front of me, obviously, but you just know when you bomb something. And they tried to have me just get up from a chair with no hands, and I fell out of the chair. They had me do exercises, just around cones that were things that, as a football player, I could have done with my eyes closed. And I had to look at the ground and kind of spatially get myself together to do these things. Simple, that memory game, simple match games that I couldn't do it. I could get, 2 or 3 matches in, and that was about it. And so it became really evident to me then just how far it had gone and how far I had basically lived with this and how long I had lived with what was a very obvious issue. And in my mind, even though you can't define CTE now in the living, there was no doubt that every box was checked at this point. And, I had to recognize what I was dealing with. So.
Yeah, I did. So I had a couple questions. Did they do they did MRI scans or some kind of scans, or?
Yeah, they did it. They did an fMRI there. And so what they did is, when we came into the study, it was an 8-week study. In the first day, they did all your baseline testing. So they did some, physical testing, mental testing, and then some emotional scoring, type of testing as well, just to see where you were at with those. And then finished out with an fMRI to see, functionally what was going on with your brain. And then the next day, they gave us the Violite NeuroGamma device and showed us how to properly use that, and then gave us a protocol for using that. So we were to use it once a day for 20 minutes every other day. So that was kind of the way that the study was set up for it. And then we were to use it for 8 weeks. And then they did weekly checkups on us to see that we were using it and to answer any questions and that kind of thing. And then in my case, so I started, I think, 2nd week of July, and I came back in the 2nd week of September. And that's when they did the follow-up testing. And, I hadn't used any other treatments. I hadn't seen anyone else for any kind of physiotherapy or the likes. So really, this was pretty much the main treatment I was using, other than some supplements.
Did you, just before, I'd love to hear, of course, what the results were when you came back, but just to back up for a sec, when you were super concerned before you found out about the light therapy, did you see any doctors, or did you have, what was that like if you did?
Yeah. Like many people that are dealing with either post-concussion syndrome or suspected CTE, all of these things shutting down and failing at once, you end up going, in my case, I went from never going to a doctor for 20 years, literally, to having probably 2 specialists a week that I was being booked with, trying to figure out what was going on with me, because nobody in their specialty world could make sense of what was happening to me and how quickly everything had come on, from, seeing a urologist and hormone specialist to seeing an audiologist and an ear, nose, and throat person, for the tinnitus, the hormone issues, seeing the neurologist and having the neurologist say, yeah, I'm not really into that CTE thing. That's not really my thing, but I'll refer you out to another neurologist in our group that, is more interested in that subject. So even, with the experts, there wasn't a whole lot of expert consensus, which is hard as well to hear, because in some cases you're gathering more on your own than you are from the medical folks. And really, in my mind, I just wanted to go through and see everybody I could, because I figured, okay, if you can't diagnose this in the living, if I go see every specialist and they eliminate everything that it's not, that's only going to leave probably one thing left that it is, and with 50 something different symptoms, that pretty much put me in the place where I am now of recognizing that this is kind of this is really one of a handful of options that are left that it could be. And based on my history, the most probable.
Did you notice anything? Well, maybe just, I wanted to notice if you noticed anything during those 2 months that you were using the V-Light, but then, I mean, most importantly, what was it like, the testing when you went back to Salt Lake City?
Okay, well, the brief side of it is, with the V-Light, they basically tell you that, everybody has different results, and you may experience things or not experience things at different times in the use. For me, I started feeling a little different about a week and a half in. And I was really kind of surprised. I mean, I was in such a bad place that to start actually feeling a little better that quick. I mean, honestly, to have, 4 red dots put on your head and you don't really see anything and you don't feel anything, you kind of are like, is this for real? Am I wrapping Christmas tree lights around my head, or is this, what is, there is a little bit of skepticism, and I understand that. And I had some, but, talking to Larry and seeing Larry's story, I knew it worked for him. And I believed in his, the scans don't lie, and his results showed that something definitively happened. And every key expert has reviewed his results and has said he definitely, received positive benefits from using this. So I believed in the science. I just was, not sure it would necessarily work for me. But week and a half in, I started feeling different. And I asked Larry, I said, is this kind of something that, I'm feeling different? I'm feeling already kind of a little more upbeat. Is that supposed to happen? Am I supposed to feel it this early? And he said, well, for me personally, he goes, I started feeling good about 2 weeks in when I started using it. And so he and I are similar in the age that we started having symptoms, and both of us being football players, that was something for me that I was like, okay, I definitely identify this. We literally played the same position. And other than a few decades of time between us, our lives were very similar. So I definitely relate to him, and started, unprompted, felt like something was definitely happening. By 4 weeks in, I was much more energetic. I was in a good mood. I was, more active with my kids. I was more social. I was more high functioning. The memory problems were going away. I was able to multitask again. At that point, my wife had even noticed, and she said, I feel like I've got my old back. And that was pretty amazing because, we had some talks, and I had thought I had been kind of hiding some of this stuff from her and my mom. And they both said, no, you were a different person. I didn't know who you were. I felt like we lost you. And they both said that at one point, separate from each other. And that was really, crazy for me to hear, because you think that you're doing so well keeping this to yourself and trying to work through it. And everybody had already seen what I had not revealed. But, they even made the statement, both of them, mind you, separately, that my eye color had changed. You're back to your pretty blue eyes, from the dark eyes that you had. And, they don't talk a lot, and they were in separate places when they said it. And that was kind of mind blowing to me too. I'm like, if this isn't an affirmation, of what's happening and what's working, I don't know what is. But so move into September. So that was the 4-week mark, which was halfway. September, totally different situation. July, I didn't know if I was even going to make it through the plane trip. September, I was fired up. It was like a football game for me. I was ready to play. I was anxious to get on that plane. I was excited to get on the plane. And I wanted to kind of show, how well this was working and how well I felt. And so I was really excited to go see the team again. They're all wonderful people. They're very caring and nurturing. And that's a big part of healing, is having people around you that care. So that's another great part of this. But I went back and just felt like I owned it. The physical tests, I mean, I was shuffling like I did when I played. I mean, I felt fast, I felt focused, I wasn't looking at the floor. I could get up on my own, I could balance, I was standing on one leg, I was doing all the things that a quote normal person could do. My memory felt spot on. The first time I went and took tests, it took me pretty much all day to complete these tests. And I had to get my scan at 7 o'clock at night because it took me so long. The second time I was done way early. They had given me like 6 hours and I was done in like an hour and a half with all the tests. So it was just that much of a difference. And I felt great on all levels. And it made me feel good to know that, when you hear about CTE and you read it's incurable and it's a progressive disease, and there's all these negative connotations that your life is not going to ever be the same. But to feel like I had stopped it, or in some cases reversed some of the symptoms, was pretty exciting. And so now I've become, the biggest advocate of it, and trying to not sell it, but, tell anybody I can who's suffering that please give it a try, because it has changed my life that much. I don't think I'd be here without it, frankly.
Wow.
That's really amazing.
That's quite a story.
Thank you.
Would you, so they did an fMRI too, right, at the end?
Correct. Yes.
And how did that compare with, I know you're a lay person, but how did that compare? What did they say?
Honestly, they were still compiling some of that information, so I don't know all the results of that. I know that I obviously was in the, clinical spectrum of, CTE symptoms, and, had what would be considered a pretty serious, symptom list of issues, but I don't know on the scans what if there was any differential on that, or how that turned out yet. So
that's something that, did they tell you they would let you know those results at some point?
Yeah. They're still compiling that information. One of the things Larry did share, though, he said, we're really excited about what we've seen from the results. There were 35 people in the study with me. And he said basically that if this was, big pharma, and if we had put the same kind of results out that we got from this, it would be national news, but, it's not, and it doesn't have that kind of, financial backing on it yet. So, but that was really encouraging to hear, because there were a lot of people that I met through this that I became friends with that were suffering as much as me, and in some cases worse, that also got relief from the process. So it gives me hope that this could be a way to help people just have a little bit more comfortable life while dealing with this. And one of the interesting things that they're also doing is they're currently using this with, I believe it's BYU's team, for current players, because again, this photobiomodulation and what it does with your mitochondria and the ATP, it's like it's a super pill in essence. I mean, it really provides that energy for your body to repair and recover. And so, you don't have to wait till you have these symptoms to use it. You can use it while you're playing. And that to me is a really intriguing part of what this potentially could be, because you could, as Larry said, he wanted to save football. You could potentially do that with something like this, that you have active players using this and recovering, just like if you sit in an ice tub for your back, we could finally start taking treatment for your brain and care of your brain while you're actually playing, which, what a novel idea.
Yeah, I read that they're doing that this season, right?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
believe so.
But so have they published yet? That so you were in an open study with
Correct.
35 individuals.
Yeah.
And they're compiling, so that they will publish something at some point.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
No, I will also be really excited to hear. And the expert guest speaker for one of our internship programs showed some of the before and after functional MRI imagery, and it's pretty amazing stuff. Even the interns who were just learning about photobiomodulation, that week for it, the guest speaker were able, you could really tell the structural connectivity differences. So really hoping to see that for you. I'm curious, are you, I might have missed this, but are you still using the equipment after the trial is ended?
Well, that's actually a great question. And that's an important follow-up to this, because one of the things, that Larry learned from his own, he was like patient one with using photobiomodulation. So that's interesting that you have someone that is, he's a professor in neurology, and he's also a football player, and he also was patient one. So, there's nobody better to hear directly from. And he had said in his study, they actually pulled the unit away from him and for a month to see if he would regress. And he did actually regress during that period when the photobiomodulation was not happening. So when you do this, it is a lifetime choice. If I don't use it, I will regress. This is a progressive disease. So it's really imperative that you stay with it and use it. So it's really easy to use. As soon as I get up in the morning, I throw it on my head for 20 minutes. I, relax in bed for a little bit and pet my dog, and it's done. It's a great way to start the day. I mean, I have enough energy that I don't even need a cup of coffee, so it really does feel like it energizes your brain that much.
Connor, did you have additional questions? It's quite the story. It's very moving. I'm so glad that you're doing better and that you're back to working full time. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm working full time. I'm in construction, so I read blueprints every day. I have 15 to 20 trades that work on my projects. They're highly complex projects that I have, and I can carry 20 to 30 projects at a time. So you do the math on that. It's infinitesimal amount of variables that go into each project. And for somebody like me to go down to where I was only able to follow a single track at a time, you can imagine how time intensive and frustrating that would be to try to do something that has that much complexity and variables to it and not have your brain function right. But now I'm everything's back to what I would say normal. I'm probably 80 to 90% of what I was pre-symptoms. So I feel highly functional, and I can do my job as well as I did prior to having the issues. So
well, yeah, really, again, just thrilled for you, and so appreciative that you were willing to come talk with us and share the amazing story with us. And so I think we found from our experience taking interviews and creating posts out of them that we want to keep them around 30 minutes.
Sure.
Just otherwise you wouldn't want to see the transcript of an hour-long interview. It's pages and pages and pages.
Understood.
But yeah, it just I think that's it on my end. Like if you don't have anything else, I just want to say
the only other thing I'd like to say is thank you for putting your organization together. You really have a well-written site, and it's very well organized, and it really has a lot of beneficial information. So I hope people that are dealing with concussions or CTE are able to find your site and run through it. And, thank you for speaking with me and allowing me to shed some positive light on dealing with suspected CTE, because, the media and the NFL have done a pretty good job of showing the dark side of, what happens with untreated CTE and, guys that may not even recognize they have it. But there's a lot of us out here that are dealing with it every day, that are supporting each other, that are looking to groups like yours to support us and give us the good information. And, that helps us live, as normal a life as we can. So that's really the important part, is that, it's hard, but being able to feel like there's people that are supporting you and caring, gets you through the day a little easier. So thank you.
Thank you so much. That's really meaningful. I thankfully, I've been only had to deal with about four diagnosed concussions myself, but it's a really crazy, scary thing out here. As part of our December internship program, our interns help create new resource pages for us. And so they did just create a new resource page, kind of outlining in a more reasonable and not inflammatory way, the kind of 4 major neurodegenerative diseases associated with concussion and repetitive head impacts. So that's on our About Concussions page now.
Oh, great.
Yeah,
Nice.
so hoping to continue to be a resource.
Thank you.
And then I think we did actually have the opportunity to interview Dr. Carr for a previous internship the year before. So if you're interested, if you're curious, we have a blog post up about that as well.
Yeah. He and I have become actually really good friends, and we chat pretty much almost weekly. So I feel very blessed to have met him, and he's a wealth of knowledge. So it's yeah, I'm sure he was a great interview.
Yeah, he's great.
We also have a blog post about the 2 case studies that Dr. Carr, when you said he was case 1, it's a blog post that goes into depth about those 2 case studies. It's super interesting.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. I've seen one of the videos on it with him, but I definitely will love to read your blog as well. It's amazing, the science of it. I mean, and it's great that they've documented, just how well this works, because it's pretty mind-boggling. But it works for other things too. My father-in-law had knee surgery, and they were concerned that he wasn't getting the range of motion and that it wasn't healing properly, and they were afraid they were going to have to go back in on him. And I bought him for Christmas a photobiomodulation pad, and he wrapped his leg for 2 weeks with it, and his wound healed up and closed, and they had suspected he even had maybe possible infection prior, and it had healed up quicker than they expected, and he had full range of motion after using it, which he did not have prior to using it, which was why they were going to give him a second surgery. So he just avoided having a second surgery, and the only thing he did different was the photobiomodulation. So, he's another believer as well. So it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, well, the use of red light for wound healing has been used and pretty well accepted for about 30 years. The idea of using, infrared light is what the Violight or V-Light uses. That's what's new, and that's what is coming up with all these trials.